the legalization of mandated toxicity and undernutrition. It will be illegal if there's a famine in, wherever there's a famine, to ship high nutrient density biscuits to that country, and it will be illegal to distribute them. That's what we're talking about.
So yeah, he or she who controls food. And now they're making it so that I couldn't grow a tomato and give it to my neighbor. I couldn't grow a tomato and transport it to my neighbor. I couldn't grow a tomato unless I used the fertilizers they told me to. Notice that the GMO food, everything's okay. And isn't it funny how all this falls in? Just like the Ground Zero Mosque went to the burning Koran one over the other to kidnappers hating Muslims. And you Jewish people should realize this because it was the hate Jew thing before. Now it's the hate Muslim thing now. But what's important about the food thing is right on time. I get my my Advocate, and this is from September 3rd. And this is the opinion section of the Sharon Advocate. In my reading through the opinion, I got to this sentence, and I thought it was rather interesting. Here, just another good view for you. I get to a rather interesting sentence. And the interesting thing about the opinion we'll go over in a minute is, it's no one's. I'll go over that. So here's what I have for you. You good?
Good. Yep.
I'll read to you this sentence. If only there was a long-stalled piece of legislation that would get to the root of the problem. This has to do with problems with food. Because remember, we just had an egg recall. Funny, they use all those eggs to make vaccines, and then they didn't sell as much flu vaccine as they wanted to. What do you do with the eggs? I don't even know about that. But salmonella in 500,000 of them or whatever. But once again, I'll read that sentence. This is 3/4 of the way through the opinion. If only there were a long-stalled piece of legislation that would get to the root of the problem. And it goes on. New paragraph. Fortunately, there is the Food Safety and Modernization Act. This is the Sharon Advocate. What I want you to notice is the opinion section of the Sharon Advocate has no author. We don't know whose opinion this is, do we? But it's in my local Sharon paper. Well, that's when I did some research. The Sharon Advocate was bought years ago by community news dealers, who are now known as Gatehouse Media. Here's a list of the Gatehouse Media news publications. There are more than 120 of them in Massachusetts. Why this is important is that the opinion that was put... Now, once again, Gatehouse Media is from New York City. Kind of like paste picante sauce, right? New York City? What the heck do you mean I got my opinion from New York City? Once again, no author written on the opinion published in multiple papers, all right in time to go right and join together with, the big egg recall. Do you see how they manipulate your media? Even your local Sharon newspaper. Manipulated out of New York City, didn't even write the author's name. Wouldn't it be nice if there was some legislation? Well, why don't you read that legislation before you let your, once again, and for the gentleman, I think it's Mr. Collins, Mr. Connors, whoever grows the really large pumpkins here in Sharon, you better read that. And for Jim, yeah, that's right. Come on, Mr. Ward's farm, Jim Ward, you better read that legislation. See, we're all too busy to read legislation, aren't we? Well, now the government's going to tell you what you can grow, how you can grow it, what fertilizer, the whole 9 yards, whether or not you can transport it, whether you can sell it. And by the way, the fines are up to $1 million. What's that going to do to the little farm guy? Is this written for the big farmer? Let me guess. Banker bailout, Main Street or Wall Street? That's right. Yeah. Who do we care about? Do we care about the little guy? Oh, and by the way, remember when you wanted hope, so you took the hopium? Yeah. How's that hope and change working for you? Not that it's any different than Bush. Bush, my dad was CIA, Obama CIA, same thing. What does the Who say? Meet the old boss just like the new boss, or the new boss just like, same. But now they're pushing that through to control food. This is what Stalin did. Did I have to tell you that taking over industry is what Hitler did? Do I have to tell you that history repeats itself if you don't study it and learn from it? Do I have to find men with testosterone to get off their buttocks in Sharon? So, that's an interesting thought, huh? So, here's a picture, just so you don't believe me. It's the control of food supply. Nothing new, just history repeating itself. Here's what to do. Yeah, people always ask what to do. Call Kerry, call Brown. Notice how Brown voted just like Kennedy, who died, would have voted. Same. Yeah. We got to go back to the show where I told you about Carroll Quigley and how he said, hey, the two-party system's a sham to, fool the people. Homework. find out what Codex Alimentarius is. So you know what to do. That is, call Kerry and Brown and say, hey, I'm against Senate 510, which is to take over control of all food production, transportation, and stuff in the United States. That's not what the federal government's for. That's not what they were empowered to do by the Constitution, I'm sorry to tell you. Once again, you have to fight for your rights. You have to exercise your rights. And as far as homework goes, your homework, once again, find out what Codex Alimentarius is. Is that a UN plan to control the food in the globe? Can they decide whether or not that place gets fed or doesn't get fed, or whether or not they can even grow that crop, let alone use a fertilizer, or they have to use a fertilizer they don't want, or they have to grow a GMO crop? GMO food's okay. Geez, you never see anybody going against Monsanto. How the people do, but the government, why? Because the FDA is run by Monsanto. Gee, the lawyers for Monsanto become lawyers for the FDA. Oh, they go back to work for Monsanto. The guy who runs the FDA comes from Monsanto. He goes back to work at Monsanto. That revolving door. And it didn't change with your hopium, did it? Gosh, just like Bush. Same people, same thing. Same Council on Foreign Relations, same globalist banksters. Hey, the same people contributed to Obama as contributed to Bush. My. You were expecting change, weren't you? Well, there's going to be change in food if you don't drop that tomato. So with that in mind, I want to God bless you. May God bless you and your family. And may God bless this republic. And at some point, maybe even we'll legalize freedom here in this country again. And as far as the government controlling all food, all distribution of food, all travel of food, no. And by the way, if it isn't said specifically, it's implied. You don't need this, especially if you just grow your own little garden. Do you remember victory gardens? When we get into the economic depression that they're driving us into, and it is going to be a depression. It took 20 years to create this. It'll take 10 to get out of it. You're going to need to know how to garden, and you're not going to need Uncle Sam or anybody else with a gun to you telling you that, hey, you broke the law because you grew a tomato and you gave it to your neighbor. Let alone you sold it at the local farmer's market or Jim Ward's Berry Farm. So it's time for you to wake up and start paying attention. These globalists, these criminals are in your government. Boot the bums out. Thanks for watching.
So tell us what's the deal here?
Well, I have studied the bill from beginning to end, and it's a bit of an overstatement to say that the bill makes all organic farming illegal, but there are 4 major problems with the bill. The first one is that it requires all food producers to pre-register in order to even grow or sell food, even if that food remains at the local community or within a state. And, historically, the federal government constitutionally is only supposed to regulate or inspect food crossing state borders. But the idea of having even Farmer John register to sell pecans at the state fair, that's a little bit of a overkill, most people think. And he has to now provide the new federal agency, the Food Security Administration, with this 24-hour emergency contact information. So this is it's a bit of an overstretch, I think, on part of the federal government. The other problem with that is a lot of people think, well, they're trying to solve salmonella and food poisoning. And, well, the problems in health and safety with food are all coming at the large industrial level, the biggest slaughterhouses and, the largest food importers from China and so forth. That's where the unhealthy food is. And these are precisely the kinds of industries that are shaping this food bill, because they're going to be the ones that will serve as the quote-unquote accredited labs under Section 211. So it's very possible, for example, in this food bill, to have Monsanto and their bioengineers set up the inspection regime for organic farmers. So the companies that specialize in frankenfood technology, for example, will be able to shape the inspection regime and even do the sampling and testing for organic food produced at the local level.
Amazing.
So
now,
really,
you said that there's 4 points. One of the things that people have said to me is that their understanding of the bill is that if you grow things in your own backyard, that's illegal, or maybe the stretch is if you grow it in your backyard and you sell it at the local farmer's market, or if you grow it in your backyard and you give it to your neighbor, that's illegal. Do I have?
Yeah, exactly.
Is that the case actually?
Yeah, well, my understanding is that if you commercialize it in any way, so if you sell it at the local farmer's market or to a co-op, the kind of hippie co-op, and you can't do any of that, which is really an overreach, because historically the federal government has not regulated farming that's that at that low level. And and again, as I said, the health problem does not exist at that level. By contrast, that's the healthiest food you can eat. And
right. It seems that the problem isn't the small or the organic farmers. It's these large processors, these large agribusinesses that even there was even organic lettuce recently that had E. coli. Turned out it came from a giant organic farm. I mean, a factory farm essentially.
And it's the largest slaughterhouses that are mixing cattle feed in with the grain and feeding it back to the cows. And this sort of cannibalistic cycle is what causes mad cow disease in the first place.
Sure.
But,
so you said there's four bad things with the bill. Let's get through them real quickly here because we've only got a few seconds.
The first one was this idea of registering everybody, and the second one I mentioned briefly, which is the idea that a lot of this accredited labs, it's going to be outsourced. And what I'm getting at here is the FSA, the new agency, won't do all of the inspections on its own. It's going to outsource to large companies, just the way that, in the same way the Department of Defense outsources security concerns to Blackwater often, we're going to see that same type of thing develop with the FSA, so that you could have Monsanto sampling and testing organic food. The third major point that I find very disturbing, and few people have picked up on it, well, no one that I can see, is that each infraction, and there are all kinds of infractions, you do one thing wrong, $1 million fine. It can be up to $1 million fine. And there's a clause in Section 401 that actually says that the FSA, which is sort of this new agency that's being given birth to here, may use the funds to carry out further enforcement activities. So this agency is going to feed off of its own finding its infractions and keeping the money to use it to look for more infractions.
Right, and it's the problem that we have with some local police departments, using the drug laws to confiscate people's cars so that they can then use for the police department to look for more people who's, et cetera.
And I think, that's a problem. The other problem,
that's wrong.
I think,
number 3.
Exactly. Well, that's number 3. Number 4 it touches on some of the points I've already mentioned, and that is that, the entire pretext for this, and it's even in the wording of the bill, is that, we're just addressing the needs. We have a growing population of immune-compromised consumers. And that's one of the phrases that they use. Well, that's it's actually the problem. Why do we have a growing population of immune-compromised consumers and people with, problems with obesity and people with diabetes and so forth? Because the food industrial complex exists at a level of, chemical agriculture and this type of thing. And basically the problem with the bill, this is the biggest problem with the bill, it's moving our nation in the opposite direction from where we need to go with food. I think people, families, communities should move in the direction of food autonomy, food security, having local, seasonal, organic food. And that is the direction that we need to go. And that's the direction of education and free markets with some inspection at the local and state level. But to have the federal government, just willy-nilly define who's going to be a food establishment or not and put everybody into these categories, random inspections, $1 million fines, that's going to favor.
This is crazy. Andrew Bosworth, we're talking with Dr. Andrew Bosworth, the website biotechempire.com. Andrew, where is this coming from, and what are the odds of this actually becoming law?
The odds are pretty high of it becoming law, I think. And this is not coming out of the blue. There's a long history, about 10, 15, 20 years or so, but of food control. And this, in 2005, we saw the National Uniformity for Food Act, and that was a Republican. This is a Democrat, so both parties are pushing food control. But the Uniformity for Food Act eliminated high state standards, like California had a high standard, Proposition 65 and so forth. And it pushed all of those high state standards down to a lower federal standard, so that really it means that food is being redistributed downward. It's sort of being reclassified downward. And we also see, for example, the National Animal ID system. That's a system to chip and keep track of all animals, which might make sense for the largest slaughterhouses, but pushing this into the Mennonite farming community isn't a very popular idea.
How do we push back on this, Andrew? We have less than a minute left, by the way, before the.
I would say
before the break.
just call your congressman, call your. I know it's a trite thing to say, but I think sometimes it works.